All right, so today we're diving into Order Out of Chaos by Paul Joseph Watson.
Oh, yeah, this one.
This book, it really goes down some rabbit holes. Claims that like an elite group, a powerful elite
Hmm?
is out there like pulling the strings,
Mm-hmm.
orchestrating world events
Right.
to increase their control.
Mm-hmm.
And to explain it all, he uses this framework called the Hegelian dialectic.
Yeah, that's a big one. A
Yeah.
lot of people talking about that.
We're not saying we
Right.
buy it or not, but we're going to break down
Do
what
you do?
Watson's saying and let you decide what you think.
Definitely. I mean, that's what we do here.
Right. It's just what we're all about.
Yeah, yeah.
So this whole Hegelian dialectic thing, what is that? What is he even talking about?
It's kind of like it's a three-step process.
Okay.
You start by creating a problem. So think like a crisis, a threat, something that gets people scared. Like really gets them like
Yeah.
on edge and demanding action.
Okay, so make a problem.
Yeah.
Got it.
And then you manage how people react to that problem.
Right.
So you steer them, right, you kind of steer them towards the solution that you want.
Okay.
And then finally you get to implement that solution. And of course it just so happens to give you more power.
Right.
You see.
Okay.
So it's all kind of,
I'm starting to see how this could play out. I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing.
yeah, in a way, yeah.
Yeah. Now, Watson uses some history to illustrate this,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Like historical examples.
Yeah, he points to events
Okay.
like the burning of Rome under Nero.
Right.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Nero.
Nero fiddled while Rome burned.
Oh, well, yeah, we don't know if he actually fiddled, but
Right.
he blamed the Christians
Okay.
for the fire and then used all that chaos and fear to go after them.
Right, yes.
Really persecute them, which of course, just made him stronger in the
Yeah.
end.
So he's basically saying this pattern has been used throughout history.
Well, that's his argument.
I mean, that's kind of a scary thought if that's true.
Well, yeah, if you think about it, I mean, if that pattern has really been going on that long.
Yeah, and he doesn't think it's just like ancient history,
Yeah,
right?
no.
He thinks it's still happening.
He argues it's still happening today. I mean, we see it all the time.
Really?
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
What examples does he give for that?
Well, he talks about
This is gonna get juicy.
he talks about like things like the Gulf of Tonkin incident.
Okay, 1964.
Yeah. That was the alleged attack by North Vietnamese forces on U.S. ships, right?
Right, and that was kind of the justification.
Exactly.
So the U.S.
It's called escalate
escalate.
involvement in Vietnam.
Yeah, getting more involved in the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
But Watson, he claims that that incident, he was either completely misrepresented or just made up
Oh, wow.
as a pretext for war.
For war, yeah, to give them a reason to go to war.
Okay, but wouldn't war be like incredibly costly?
Of course. I mean,
Right.
in terms of lives and
Well, in the
money.
current sources, yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge undertaking.
So what would be the point?
Well, and that's where,
Yeah.
things get really controversial.
Okay.
Watson argues that some powerful people, powerful groups,
Okay.
they actually benefit from conflict and chaos.
Okay.
He claims they use these events to get richer and more powerful,
Oh, wow.
and often, it's the ordinary people who pay the price.
So he's saying someone might actually start a war
Well,
to make a profit.
that's what he's suggesting.
But
It's a very serious accusation.
Well, that's a big accusation.
You have to remember, I mean, Watson, he's presenting a very specific viewpoint,
Right.
right? He's not just
It's the
like reporting facts.
Yeah.
He's putting forward a theory,
Yeah. He's trying to
explain these complex global events.
That's
So it's up
nice.
to each person, to look at the evidence and decide
decide what they believe.
what they believe.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But okay, let's go back to the Gulf of Tonkin for a
yeah.
second. I mean, what evidence does Watson give?
He points to a couple things.
Okay.
For example, there were these contradictory reports from the U.S. sailors
Oh, wow.
who were actually involved in the incident,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And some historians, they've argued that President Johnson, his statements about the attack, they were kind of misleading.
Oh, yeah.
And then you got the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution,
Right.
which gave Johnson the power to use the military in Vietnam. That was
Yeah.
just rushed through Congress.
Really?
Very little debate,
Wow.
not much scrutiny.
So they kind of just
And Watson sees this as evidence that, they wanted to capitalize on the fear and outrage.
Take advantage of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So it's not just the event itself, but it's how it was used.
It's how they used it
to kind of change
to manipulate
public opinion and policy.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So it's all connected.
I see.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to talk about
He talks about other
modern events.
Yeah, other modern events that he thinks fit this pattern.
Really?
Yeah. Like what?
Well, another one he focuses on is the Omagh bombing
Okay.
in Northern Ireland.
Right. That was 1998.
Yeah, 1998.
That was a terrible, terrible bombing.
Awful tragic.
Car bomb.
Yeah.
Killed 29 people, injured hundreds more.
Absolutely horrific.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
And Watson, he makes some disturbing claims.
Claims about this.
About it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He suggests that that British intelligence,
Okay.
they knew about the bombing beforehand.
Right.
But they let it happen.
To protect a double agent they had within the real IRA.
Wow.
The group behind the attack.
If that's true, that is
It's a very, very disturbing thought.
incredibly disturbing.
Yeah.
Is there any evidence for that?
Well, he cites a few sources.
Okay.
He mentions the testimony of the double agent himself, Kevin
yeah.
Fulton, who claims that he warned his handlers
Oh, wow.
about the bombing
Before it happened.
beforehand.
Yeah. And they did nothing.
And he also mentions a report from the Sunday Herald newspaper,
Okay.
which alleged that that British intelligence, they had intercepted communications
Well, wow.
between the bombers,
So they knew it was going to happen.
but they didn't act
Wow.
on that information.
So he's saying that,
It's pretty chilling stuff.
yeah, that not only was this allowed to happen, but
Yep.
then it was
It was used
to justify
more
surveillance, more control.
and control.
Exactly. After the bombing, the British government
Yeah.
passed a whole bunch of new anti-terrorism laws,
Right.
which Watson sees as part of this pattern
Right.
of exploiting tragedy for political gain.
Right. Right.
You know.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how he's connecting these
Yeah.
seemingly like disparate events.
Yeah, he's weaving them all together.
Yeah, into this bigger narrative.
Into this larger narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's
pretty heavy stuff.
heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Is there any light at the end of this tunnel?
Well, that depends on how you look at it.
Right.
Watson does offer some solutions,
Okay.
ways to resist what he sees as this tyranny.
Okay.
But before we get to that,
Yeah.
we need to understand
Understand this bigger picture.
this new world order.
This new world order agenda.
Yes, this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah, this is where it all comes together,
Okay. All right, let's get into that.
Let's dive in.
Yeah. So we've talked about like the Hegelian dialectic and how Watson thinks it's been used, to manipulate things like the Gulf of Tonkin and the Omagh bombing. But where does this New World Order fit into all of this? What is it exactly? And what does Watson think they're trying to do?
Well, the way Watson sees it, the New World Order, it isn't like some secret society, meeting in the shadows. It's more like a system. An ideology is kind of slowly, taking over on a global scale.
Okay.
And the end goal, according to Watson, is to create a world where a tiny elite, they have all the power.
Right.
And the rest of us, we're just subjects. We don't have any say.
That doesn't sound very good.
Yeah, it's a pretty grim picture.
So what are some of the defining characteristics of this New World Order?
Well, Watson, he points to a few trends that he thinks are, pushing this agenda.
Okay.
One is the rise of global governance.
Okay.
He sees these organizations like the UN, the European Union, these trade agreements
Right.
as kind of like chipping away at national sovereignty, paving the way for this one, like all-powerful world government.
Okay, but isn't some kind of like global cooperation necessary to deal with things like climate change, poverty, all the international conflicts going on?
Yeah, that's a fair point. And that debate's been raging for decades. But Watson, he argues that these global institutions, they're often unaccountable to the people they're supposed to represent. And they're easily manipulated by powerful interests.
So he's worried about too much power in the hands of a few.
Yeah, exactly. He wants a truly democratic system,
Right.
a representative system.
Not just like a select
not an elite
group of people.
calling the shots. Yeah.
Gotcha. What else?
Another big piece of this New World Order agenda, according to Watson,
Yeah.
is this erosion of individual liberties. Like freedom You know, he sees this trend towards more surveillance, more control, more censorship.
Right.
He points to things like the Patriot Act
Oh,
in
right.
the U.S., which, you know,
Yeah, that expanded the government's power. Right, after 9/11.
after 9/11. Yeah.
Yeah, and, similar laws, legislation in other countries.
And that was very controversial.
Oh, yeah. Hugely controversial.
Some people said, look, we need this, we need this to stop terrorism.
Right.
But others felt like it went too far.
Yeah, that it sacrificed too much privacy, freedom.
Sacrificing freedom for security.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Watson's worried about.
Yeah.
He thinks governments are using security as this excuse
Oh, interesting.
to justify these intrusive measures
Right.
that ultimately, weaken freedom and democracy.
Feel like a slippery slope almost.
Yeah, like they just keep pushing the boundaries.
Yeah. And he doesn't just see this in relation to terrorism, right?
No. He sees it everywhere.
Oh, really?
Yeah, all sorts of areas.
Like what?
Well, for example, he talks about this push towards a cashless society,
Okay.
where all transactions are tracked, monitored.
By banks, by governments.
Right.
He mentions things like biometric identification.
Right.
Where people are identified, by their fingerprints, their faces, even their DNA.
And he sees that as
eroding our privacy.
Right. Wow, it's a little scary to think about.
It is a bit unsettling.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how these things could be used for good or bad.
Right.
I mean, it could prevent crime, make transactions easier.
Right, more efficient.
But they could also be used to track people.
Absolutely.
Control what they spend.
Control their movements, their spending.
It's a little unsettling.
Yeah, and Watson argues that this technology, it's moving so fast that we're just sleepwalking into this future where we've got no control over our data, our lives.
Okay, so we've got global governance, we've got less freedom, we've got the surveillance state.
Right.
What else does Watson see as part of this agenda?
Well, another big one for him is this intentional creation of chaos and crisis.
We talked about the Hegelian dialectic.
Exactly right.
How he thinks it's been used to manipulate events.
Right, to steer things in a certain direction.
And he sees this as like a bigger pattern, right?
A much broader pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's saying that these powerful forces, they're not just reacting to events.
Right.
They're actually creating them. Oh. Or at least, making them worse.
To justify their solutions.
Exactly. To justify their solutions, which always seem to involve more control.
Right.
And less freedom.
That's a big accusation.
It is, yeah. It almost sounds like a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
But he argues, if we look at the evidence, there's this clear pattern of these manufactured crises being used to push this agenda.
So it's not just like random things happening.
Yeah.
It's how those events are.
It's how they're framed, how they're used to shape public opinion.
Right. And to change government policy.
Exactly. And he thinks it's all deliberate.
Wow.
It's a strategy to keep people in this constant state of fear,
right?
So they'll accept these authoritarian solutions.
Okay, this is starting to sound pretty dystopian.
Yeah, it's a bit bleak.
Is there any hope? Does Watson offer any solutions?
He does, yeah. In fact, he thinks that individual awareness and action are crucial to fighting this trend.
Okay.
The first step, he says, is education.
Okay.
Understanding how these systems work, how they're being put in place.
So knowledge is power.
Exactly. He thinks that once people understand the threat, they can start to resist it.
Makes sense.
He wants people to be critical thinkers.
Right.
To question the narratives, do their own research.
Not just take what they're being told.
Exactly. Don't just believe everything you hear.
Right. But what about like concrete actions? What can people actually do?
Well, he suggests a few things. He says support alternative media.
Oh, great.
The outlets that are challenging the mainstream narrative. Get involved in local politics.
Okay.
Hold your elected officials accountable.
Yeah.
Push for policies that protect freedom.
Right.
So basically, get informed, get involved, speak out against injustice.
Right. Make your voice heard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he also emphasizes building community.
Okay.
Connecting with people who share your values. Because he thinks when people come together, they become a force to be reckoned with.
I think that's something that resonates with a lot of people, especially now when there's just so much negativity and division.
Absolutely, yeah. And Watson's book, while it's, definitely controversial, it gives us a framework to understand some of these scary trends that we're seeing.
Yeah.
It's a call to action, you know? It
Yeah.
reminds us that we have the power to change things, but
Mhm.
only if we wake up and fight for it.
Wow. I really appreciate you breaking all this down for me.
Sure.
It's a lot to process.
It is, yeah. There's a
Yeah.
lot going on.
It is, but it's definitely given me a lot to think about. Watson's perspective is certainly, it's unique. It's thought-provoking,
Definitely.
even if you don't agree with everything he says.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely makes you think.
He does. He makes you think. Okay, so we've gone through Watson's claims, this whole Hegelian dialectic thing, the New World Order agenda, and all the potential threats to, individual liberty.
Yeah.
It's a lot, and I'm sure some of it sounds kind of, out there.
Yeah, for sure.
But even if you don't buy into everything he's saying,
Right.
I think it's important to recognize that he's bringing up some real concerns about power, right?
Absolutely.
Like how power is concentrated and how, freedom is eroding in the world.
Yeah, that's one of the things that makes Watson's argument so interesting. You know, he really focuses on the dangers of power.
Right.
Like when it's unchecked, when there's no accountability.
And he uses some pretty intense examples from history to illustrate this, right?
Yeah, he goes way back, like all the way back to Nero.
Right, the Roman emperor.
Yeah, the one who supposedly, set fire to Rome.
Right, to clear land for his palace.
Exactly. And then blame the Christians for it.
Right.
And use that crisis to basically just grab more power.
Wow.
It's a crazy story.
Yeah, and he connects that to other historical figures too, right?
Yeah, he talks about Hitler,
Right.
who used the Reichstag fire as an excuse to crack down on his enemies.
Right, to establish a totalitarian regime.
Right, and it's like this playbook
Yeah.
that's been used over and over again.
Create a crisis,
Yeah.
blame somebody,
Yeah.
and then use the fear and the chaos
Yeah.
to take control.
Exactly. And Watson's arguing that we're still seeing this today.
Right.
He points to things like the Gulf of Tonkin, the Omagh bombing.
Right, as examples of how governments might manipulate events.
Yeah, or even create them.
He even suggests that 9/11
Yeah.
might fit this pattern,
Right.
claiming that there's evidence of a government conspiracy.
That's a big one.
Yeah, and we're not, we're not here to say whether we believe that or not,
Right.
but it does raise some questions
It does. It makes you think.
about, the official narratives, the stories we're told.
Yeah, like should we just accept them at face value?
Right.
Or should we be questioning things?
Exactly. And Watson he's all about questioning things.
Yeah, he's a big advocate for skepticism,
Yeah.
for critical thinking.
Do your own research.
Exactly.
Don't just, blindly trust what you're told.
Especially from the mainstream media.
Right. He's pretty critical of the media
Oh, yeah, he sees them as complicit
in this whole thing.
in promoting these agendas of the powerful.
Right. He thinks they focus on sensationalism and fear.
Yeah, like fear-mongering.
Yeah.
Instead of, actual balanced reporting.
Right. Which creates this climate of fear and uncertainty,
Exactly.
which makes it easier for governments to do whatever they want.
Right, they can justify anything.
And he also points out how easy it is to manipulate people
Oh, yeah.
through propaganda and misinformation.
Especially in the age of social media.
Right, where everyone has a platform,
Anyone can spread whatever they want.
whether it's true or not.
Exactly, and it can be really hard to know what to believe.
So given all these threats, all this manipulation, what does Watson say we should do?
Well, he has a few suggestions. He talks about supporting alternative media,
Okay.
the outlets that are, challenging the mainstream narrative.
Right.
He says, get involved in local politics,
Okay.
hold your elected officials accountable,
Right.
push for policies that protect freedom.
So get informed, get involved, speak out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Make your voice heard.
And he also talks about building community. Right.
Yeah. Connecting with people who share your values.
Because he thinks when people come together,
There's strength in numbers.
yeah, they can make a difference.
Exactly.
He also stresses the importance of education,
Oh, yeah.
learning about history, economics, politics,
Yeah. Understanding how the world works.
so we can see how power is being used.
Right. And how to resist it.
And he even talks about like self-sufficiency skills.
Oh, yeah. Like gardening, home repair, alternative energy.
So we're not so reliant on these systems.
Right. So you're not dependent on the people who might be trying to control you.
So it's about taking back control of your own life.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Wow, it's a lot to think about.
It is. Yeah.
But I think, Watson's perspective is it's really valuable.
It is. It makes you think.
It challenges us to see the world differently.
Definitely.
And even if you don't agree with everything he says,
Right.
I think it's important to have these conversations.
Yeah. To engage with these ideas.
Absolutely. Well, that's our deep dive into Order Out of Chaos by Paul Joseph Watson.
It's been a wild ride.
It has been a wild
A
ride.
lot of twists and turns.
We've covered everything from, alleged government conspiracies to the dangers of a new world order.
But hopefully it's given you something to think about.
Yeah, maybe even inspired you to do some of your own digging.
As always, we encourage you to do your own research.
Question everything.
Come to your own conclusions.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And remember, stay curious.